Hi, Fiona.
Hello, Claire.
Thanks very much for coming along today. And you're going to be talking about why you think we need to end care charging. So, do you want to start off just telling us a little bit about yourself and how you've been involved in the carers movement?
Yeah, well, I care for my husband who's got advanced Parkinson's, and he was diagnosed almost 30 years ago. So he was young when he was diagnosed, and both working full time, and our second child had just been born. So that was a difficult time. But we managed, we got by without support for the next pretty much 20 years. And then it was, well, at that point, his condition was deteriorating quite markedly, and the medication wasn't working as it was. And we're also at that stage where we're like the sandwich generation, where I was, caring for four elderly relatives as well as caring for Martin and our two children. So it was getting really tricky. Martin's dad was terminally ill at that point as well, so we realised that we needed some help. So I asked social work for the first time. Took about a year, I think, for the support to be agreed, and by that time Martin's dad had died, sadly. Um, but a small budget was then agreed of £8,000 for Martin, and that enabled us to employ a personal assistant and for her to come in and provide some support while I was at work, and it enabled me to continue working full time. And but so that lasted for maybe about a couple of years. Maybe we had a social worker for a while. He retired. There wasn't a social worker reallocated, um, and life got even more difficult then. And my father, he was found unconscious with a head injury, and he died. And not long before that, an aunt, his sister, who we've both been caring for, had passed away. And so I'd been going up and down with my dad to Dundee and with my aunt when she passed away, and then my dad died, and so that was a really traumatic time. And of course, there was still no social worker allocated, and nobody knew about that. So the next contact we had was from the financial assessor who came out. And of course, by that time, I'd inherited just a modest sum of money. My dad wasn't well off or anything. But anyway, suddenly the charge went from zero to £128.77 a week, which was really shocking and staggering. And of course, there's no, it's like instant. You have to start paying this charge instantly, and it just wasn't affordable. So we complained, and it went through stage two. We had our MSP involved. Then they said that the charge was on hold because the council was reviewing its charging thresholds. But of course, by that time, that's really what got me into looking more into this, because at that time I was working in social work in a different authority where there was no charge for self-directed support. So the fact that this authority where we live charged to this extent as well was really shocking. So then at that time, I found out about Scotland Against the Care Tax, and I found out about the Coalition of Carers, and found that there was a campaign to end personal care charging for under 65s, and the Coalition of Carers, actually. That's when I became really impressed with the work of the Coalition of Carers, because I could see that they were actively involved in Scotland Against the Care Tax and actively campaigning around this issue, because it was hard to find people who actually were campaigning. And so anyway, a few months later, the council reviewed its charging thresholds. The charge went down to 23.17 a week, which still felt unfair, but at least it was more manageable. Um, and uh, and Martin's budget went up a little bit. The council allocated a carers budget, which to me was was a kind of sap. It was a way of saying, well, we know we're charging, but we'll add this carers budget. But they've never done a carer support plan in all that time. So it's a notional budget because it can't be spent because there's no carer support plan, despite me asking constantly for a carer support plan. And they wouldn't not allocate a carers budget and stop charging, even though that would have left them better off. They still had to charge because that was their policy. So to me, it just felt nonsensical and a mess. And but then at that time, the free personal care was going to be introduced for under 65s. It was announced that in I think it was May 2019, there was going to be free personal care. So we thought, oh, that's brilliant. We won't have, because it felt like it was taking over our lives, this feeling of injustice actually, but we felt that was going to go away. But actually, what then happened was that there was a review of Martin's support. His support needs had increased, but then the charge increased as well. Even though, in our minds, all Martin's care was personal care, but the council didn't regard it all as personal care, because sometimes it was personal care when the personal assistant was taking him out to be involved in things. It was still helping with toileting and that kind of thing, which is personal care. But because he was outside the house, the council regarded it as not personal care. So the charge went up. And I think that happened with a lot of people, that even though there was notionally free personal care, it didn't make a difference to anybody's lives. So since then, the charge has been £82.75 a week, which actually is reduced from Martin's direct payment. So, it's not as bad as it might be, in that, we're not having to actually physically pay that money, but we are in a sense, because it's reduced from his budget. And it's all very nebulous, the breakdown about how the councils reach these sums. It isn't transparent. They just tell you it's 50% personal care, 50% not. But they can't explain how they've reached that conclusion.
Yeah, so
So,
basically what you're saying is you've been campaigning for many years for this because it's unfair and it's confusing and it's not transparent as to why people are being charged and how much. So if it comes in then and they end care charging, what difference do you think that'll make to carers, Fiona, from your perspective?
well, I think it'll make a massive difference. It'll make, because I think actually that all this, the ordeal of the feeling of injustice and campaigning and so on, it's affected our health. It's affected my health. It affected Martin's health. So it's going to improve carers' well-being. The charge that's been applied in our case is all based on my income and my savings, and the fact that I've had relatives who passed away, because Martin's just on DLA, and a very small personal pension. And so it'll improve people's finances. It's a human rights issue, because people shouldn't face this charge to live the kind of lives that other people live. They don't live the lives that other people live, but they shouldn't be crippled with these charges. Disabled people are already financially disadvantaged by the fact of their disability. Parkinson's UK did some research back in 2017 that showed that the cost of having Parkinson's is 16,582 a year. So, and then the cost of caring, carers are financially disadvantaged, because to give up work early, I had to give up work early to care for Martin. They turned down career opportunities. Carers are disadvantaged, and to face charges on top of that, it's a human rights issue. So it's not, it'll help in many, many ways.
I think you make some really good points, Fiona. And also, I think the stress of having to go through it all as well, the whole financial assessment kind of is difficult as well on top of that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. You make a really good case. And I'm sure that everybody in the room will agree with you. Thanks very much, Fiona.
Thanks, Claire.
Okay, to stop the recording.